Hey you guys, it's me Crystal. So I thought I would try for like a chatty style video today, which is not my forte, so we'll see how this goes. But today I wanted to talk about kind of like my thoughts on like not finishing books or DNFing books, or like starting books and then not reading very much and then giving up. And so basically this is on my mind because January for reading got off to a pretty bad start. And I think part of it is because I read a couple of books at the end of December that kind of wore me out. And I probably should have DNF'd both of those books, but I didn't. And so I was worn out. And instead of taking a break, I picked up another book. And instead of DNFing that book, and I should have because I didn't like it, I forced myself through it because I had spent like 7 days kind of slogging through the book, and I was almost halfway done and the book was not that long. And I was like, I could probably finish this in a couple of days if I just like sat down and did it. And I guess I didn't want to spend like my first week of January not finishing anything. And so I kind of forced myself to finish it, which is just complete nonsense. And so anyway, I decided that I am no longer going to be slogging through books and forcing myself through books that I'm not enjoying. And so yeah, I decided to talk about why, try to figure out why I was so reluctant to DNF books and why I have decided that reluctance is ridiculous and I'm not going to be that way anymore. So as far as the like return on time investment, like I understand this. I do. Like I understand that I'm like, I have all my reading goals and I just kind of felt like I don't want to fall behind at the very beginning of the year, but I'm like, I should treat January the same way I treat August. And it's like, if I would not mess around with this book in August, then I shouldn't mess around with it in January. And it's kind of like, it doesn't matter. Like the entire point, I keep having to remind myself of this, like at the beginning of every year, the whole point of my reading goal is to make sure that I'm prioritizing reading, because when I'm reading a book that I love, it brings me a lot of joy. And it's like, I just want to make sure that I am prioritizing something that's important to me. So I have a reading goal. And also I like to keep track of things. I like to see how many books I'm reading the year and compare it to how many books I've read the previous year. And I just like to do stuff like that. And so, but this is not something that's supposed to stress me out. But I think a lot of times that's why I'm reluctant to not finish a book, is because I spent so much time trying to read it and I kind of like don't want all of that time to go down the drain. But it's kind of like, do I want to waste more time on something that I'm not liking, or do I just want to say, look, I tried to read it, I didn't like it, it's over, let's move on. So that's what I'm deciding that I'm going to be doing from now on, is that no matter how long I've spent trying to read a book, if I'm not enjoying it at any point, I'm going to cut it loose. Because like there are a lot of books out there, you guys, and not every single book is for me. Not every single book is for every single person. I have, particular taste. I have like genres that I like, and, plot points, and, types of characters and types of atmosphere. And there's, specific writing styles that I like. And that's where we have all of these different kinds of books. That's where we have all of these different kinds of genres. Everyone has things that they like. And so this way, there's something out there for everyone. So if I pick up a book that I think sounds interesting, but maybe the writing style or the execution or something isn't for me, then it's okay if I put that book down. A lot of books are very similar. And so it's like, if I don't like this author's take on this particular topic, then maybe I'll like another author's take on that topic. That's kind of the benefit of there being like so many stories that are very similar to each other, is that if you happen to love something, like you really love like, melodramatic vampire romances, not only do you have a lot to choose from, but it's like, if you don't read all of them, then you're not missing out on anything, because so many of them are exactly the same. And so reading is one of my favorite hobbies, right? And so it's like, I spend a lot of time reading, and time is not infinite. I'm not a vampire. And so it's like, I do not have 100 years to just like read all the books in the world. I only have a set number of years to read. And so I don't want to spend, the years that I have, with there being so many books that I want to read, and with there being more books coming out every year that I want to read, I don't want to spend the time that I have slogging through books that I'm not enjoying. Because it's like one of my other hobbies that I like to do is singing, but I don't enjoy singing if I'm singing music that I don't like, right? So why am I going to spend time singing songs and singing genres of music that don't bring me joy? I'm not. So it's like, why am I going to read books, that aren't bringing me joy? I shouldn't do that. So basically what started me wanting to talk about this is because in December, I read To Sleep in the Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini and Uprooted by Naomi Novik. And even though I thought that ultimately they were both good books, and I ended up really liking Uprooted, I should have DNF'd both of those books. Because I read To Sleep in the Sea of Stars mostly because it was super fast paced, and even though the book was super long, I was getting through it fairly quickly, and I just really wanted to kind of slay that monster. I actually don't regret reading that book, but I probably should have DNF'd it when it was starting to wear me out, or at least maybe I should have read a little bit of it and then taken a break and then gone back and read a little bit more instead of just kind of barreling through it. And I know maybe it sounds weird for me to say, oh, I really liked Uprooted, but I should have DNF'd it. And that's because when I read a book that doesn't bring me joy and that I'm not enjoying, it kind of wears me out. And so I've fallen into several reading slumps over the years, because I force my way through books that I'm not enjoying, and then I don't want to read anything, and then I just sit there and eat popcorn and watch The Office for the 5th time or Parks and Recreation for the 3rd time, which is what I'm doing now. I've been binging Parks and Recreation for the 3rd time. Which is totally fine, but it was brought on by the fact that I just needed to relax, and I just needed some kind of palate cleanser. And so not only did I not take a break after reading those 2 books, I then started the year off by reading The Time Weaver by Shauna Abe, I think, and I'll talk a little bit about it in my reading wrap up, but I was around page 30, I think, when I was I am not going to like this book, and I slogged through it for about 7 days. And I was I am so close to being done. So I had to bribe myself with episodes of Parks and Rec. And so I was for every, 30 minutes that I read, I can watch 2 episodes of Parks and Rec. And it's I should not have to do that. I should not have to do that. I should be saying, oh, I'm going to watch an episode or 2 of Parks and Rec while I eat dinner, and then I'm going to turn it off and read the rest of the evening because I really want to know what happens in this book. And that's what happened when I finished The Time Weaver, and then I decided to DNF a couple other books because I wasn't enjoying them, because I was you know what, I'm not doing this to myself anymore. I should have quit reading The Time Weaver. Even if I'd spent 2 weeks trying to read it, I should have just quit it because it was not worth it. I hated that book. I hated the entire experience I had reading that book, and it's this is not how I want to live my life, okay? And then I picked up Death Note and Shadow and Bone, and oh my gosh, I love those so much, and I was looking forward to them. I couldn't wait to pick those books up and continue reading. And then I was turning the TV off. I was turning Parks and Rec off because I'm I need more time to read. So I would just watch a couple episodes, however long it takes me to eat dinner, and then I would turn it off, and then I would just sit there and just wrap myself up in these stories. And I'm this is how I want every single book I read to feel. I want to feel energized and excited. And it's I look forward to it, and I wake up in the morning and I'm yes, I get to spend another day reading this amazing book. This is how I want to feel with everything. And it's even if the content isn't super fun, in those books, and it's more somber content, I still want to go to that book with this energy and this excitement. Oh, I want to read this. I want to know what happens. I want to know what this person has to say, whether it's a nonfiction book or whatever, So basically what was going on was that after all the torture I went through to finish the Time Weaver book, I picked up The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. And I think, honestly, that those characters are very interesting, and I think that the plot is interesting and the world is interesting. The problem is that book is everything that I don't like about fantasy books. It is hard to read, it is laborious, there are a lot of long names for all the characters and everything. All the villages, the rivers, the clothing people wear, everything is so long. And I'm going to actually read you a paragraph because it is exactly where I put this book down, because I'm like, I cannot do this. And I know I put the book down pretty early, but the way I see it is 25 pages or less is enough for me to know if I want to continue with a book. 25 pages is enough to get a feel for the story and to lay the framework for things to come. And so in 25 pages, I should feel this kind of anticipation and like this sense that like, you know, crap's gonna hit the fan. Things are going to get more interesting, like something that I'm personally interested in is going to happen. And I should know that very early on in the book. And it's like at this point, I've read a lot of books and I've never gotten the page, depending on the length of the book. It's happened one time that book was over 1,000 pages long. One time I forced myself to read at least 50 pages of a book, and things started to get interesting on page like 35. But it's like, that was also a long time ago. And if I never read that book, like my life would be exactly the same, you know? Even though I love that book, my life would be the same. Okay, so I don't want to come down on this book or this author, because like I said, I do think it's probably really interesting. I just don't think that it is the right book for me, and I don't think it's something that I want to read. So I'm going to read you this paragraph, and in this art copy, it's at the bottom of page 21. And I'm just going to read this so that you know what I'm talking about. And maybe you think I'm overreacting and I'm being dramatic, and that's fine. But it's like, this is my time, and I do not want to spend my time pushing around, 500-pound boulders up a mountain to read an interesting book. There are books that are, I personally would find much more accessible and much more easy to read. And I've been on the fence because I think the characters are interesting and I think the plot is potentially interesting and the world is interesting, on whether or not I'm going to try to read this book again later. But anyway, so this is what it says. Because she was not Alta Renata Veradox, daughter of Latilia Trimentis. She was a Renza Lenskaya, half Varasian river rat, and even with a forged letter of credit to help, pretending to be a Cetrian noblewoman wasn't cheap. That's just way too much work, okay? And this is a co-authored book, so I don't know who wrote this chapter or who wrote this point. The whole book has been like this. The first 25, I quit on page 24. Because I just feel like that's enough. That's enough suffering, and that's enough for me to tell that this is not for me. And it's like, this is what happens when you send books to a literary agent. They will read maybe, up to 25 pages of your manuscript, and then they're pass judgment on the whole thing. And on one hand, you're like, that's not enough. You need to have time to warm up. No, you get one page. You get one page to capture somebody's attention, and then it's over. And it's like, if I was a literary agent, I would do the same thing. I would ask for about 5 sample pages, and if I didn't like them, it's over, And on one hand, it's like, that's a lot of pressure, but it's like, it's not. To somebody else, they may find that sentence and think, oh, that sounds fun. That sounds full personality. I see that sentence and I see a 500-pound boulder that I have to push up a mountain. And everybody is different. And so it's like, I have very specific things that I like, and this is not one of them. And then the other book I decided to DNF, actually the same day I decided to DNF this, was a book that an author asked me if I wanted to read their YA horror novella, and it was called The Scavenger. And I want to say their name was Aiden Lucid. I'm not going to mention this book or this other book in my reading wrap-up because they're DNFs. But that was a novella, right? And so I read the first chapter and I thought it was kind of like reminiscent of like Goosebumps, and it was like kind of ridiculous and over the top and dramatic. And I don't think the author meant for it to be hilarious, but I tend to find things like that hilarious. So even though it doesn't sound like a compliment, like that was kind of a compliment, because after the first chapter, I was like, oh, that was hilarious. this should be like really fun. And then immediately the book got like super boring. And I'm pretty sure if I do the conversion right, because I was on the ebook with, percentages and locations and not page numbers, but I think if I did the math right, the conversion right or whatever, I quit on page about somewhere between page 13 and 15. And that's not a lot, but this is also a novella. I'm like, you do not have, like, by the time I get 25 pages in, like, to me, the way my brain works, I'm almost done. And so it's like, that's enough time. That's enough time for a novella. And it was just like, already, it was like repetitive, and it's like the writing wasn't like, great. It wasn't terrible, but it was like, if this was like this kind of over the top, goosebumps like horror novel, and I wasn't supposed to take it very seriously, or, if it had continued that kind of fun over the topness of the book, I probably would have really liked it and finished it and given it 4 stars or something. But as it was, I was like, there are other books I'd rather be reading, and that are like better written and that are more interesting to me personally. But like the concept for that book was that these teenagers like find this wishing well, and I was under the impression it was like a monkey's paw situation, that you make a wish and at first you think you're getting what you want and then something terrible happens. And 13 pages in, I was still just following these teenagers around. And also, this is gonna sound really petty, but like the characters kept getting on Facebook and using Google Chrome. And I'm like, I'm really sensitive to pop culture references. So if you mention something like that and it's not necessary, it kind of irks me a little bit. And that is a personal peeve. And sometimes if I'm really into a book, I'll just ignore all the pop culture references. Every once in a while I'm like, oh, that was fun, but most of the time I hate it so much. And also, these were teenagers. I'm like, are teenagers even on Facebook? Like, I thought they were more like Snapchat and TikTok and maybe Instagram people. And also, I'm pretty sure to sign up for Facebook, I'm pretty sure you have to be, well, technically you're supposed to be 18 to have a Facebook account. I don't know any teenagers personally, so I don't have any teenagers that I can ask, but I don't think there are any teenagers on Facebook. And I'm like, why are these kids getting on Facebook? Why are they not Snapchatting each other or just texting each other? Why are they sending each other Facebook messages? It was just weird to me. And I'm like, the fact that this is sticking out to me means that this is not the book for me. Like back when I was like in middle school and high school, I did used to give books a little bit more time. I had what I call the 10% rule, and I would take 10% of the total page number, and that's how long the book had to get my attention. So the book was 100 pages. It had 10 pages to get my attention. And that's because I could only check out so many books at the library. And I read a lot of books back then. And so I would read a book a day most days. And so it's like, if I go to the library every week and they only let me have 7 books, those 7 books are going to be gone in 7 days. And also at the time I could only buy, so many books also at one time. And so it's like, I wanted to maximize I wanted to maximize my reading or whatever. I didn't want to take a book home and then like not enjoy it. So I would stand in the bookstore or stand in the library and I would read the first several pages of a book. And sometimes it didn't take that long. But if I was struggling to get into a book, then I would push, a few more pages. So like, that's how I ended up getting through that 1,000-page book, is because of the 10% rule. I read that book in high school. I was going to have to page 100, but because I was struggling so much, I decided to cut it in half and only give it to page 50. And like I said, it got interesting around page 35. And that actually worked out really well for me, because most of the books that I read, like when I was in middle school and high school, outside of this kind of like spill I went through in the 8th grade where I was reading teen contemporary romance books and hating them so much. Outside of that, most of the books that I picked up when I was younger, like I absolutely love. Like there were some books like Sweet Valley High books, and like Babysitter Club books and Goosebumps that I just picked up and read them blindly because, that series and those authors, you know, they kind of like had my trust. So I knew that I would probably at least, you know, like the book, even if I didn't love it or even really like it. I at least wouldn't want my time back at least. So what I'm doing now in order to keep me from like falling into this trap of, oh my gosh, I've been trying to read this book for 2 weeks. I've wasted 2 weeks on this book. I should go ahead and finish it. To keep me from falling into that trap, I'm instituting a 25 pages or less rule. So basically what I'm going to do going forward is the book has a max of 25 pages to get my attention. And if I can't get into the book by page 25, I'm done. And like I said, I might quit earlier than that. I might quit on page 10. I have actually like read samples of books online and have read like a couple of paragraphs and quit. Sometimes you're just not into something, and I think that that's totally okay. A lot of books, you know, have similar themes and, you know, just similar plot points and things of that nature. It's just the execution is different, and so it's like, this book isn't for me, but it's probably great for someone else. Like I said, I think this book is probably really great for someone else. The scavenger ebook that I was trying to read is probably fine for someone else. It's just, it's not for me. This isn't for me. The Time Weaver really wasn't for me. And yeah. So yes, to keep myself from falling into the trap of the longer I suffer, the more likely I am to force myself to continue suffering, to put an end to that nonsense, yeah, I'm going to say you have a max of 25 pages, and I think that's enough time. Now, the main reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to get through my TBR, and I don't know how this sounds, but I am planning on DNFing and unhauling a lot of books this year. And that's just because there are a lot of books that I've had for a while, and there are a lot of books I bought just based on the cover. And some of those books I'm going to love, and some of those books I'm just not, and that's totally okay. I just feel like most books that I've ended up loving, I loved it almost immediately. And books that I've ended up not enjoying, I could feel like it draining my energy also almost immediately. I think it's just like a stylistic thing. So yes, I would be interested in hearing your thoughts. Feel free to share them. Have a great week, and I will see you next time. Bye.